Hi everyone. While we wait for the session to begin, I've created a quick poll for you to participate in. You can join by scanning the QR code on the screen or using the short URL provided. The poll asks you, what's your biggest question about using artificial intelligence and large language models in institutional research? Questions like how to use it, so that's technical question, or a strategic question like how do I persuade my boss to give more budget on using AI, or conceptual level, for example, what is LLM? So I use the acronym here, but what is LLM if you don't know? That could be a good question too. So you can raise your question and make sure it's your biggest question. You are thinking about it for a while, maybe before attending this session, and it motivates you to come to this session, for example. So we'll spend a few minutes on this activity as more people may join us. And I'll wait a few more minutes for you to answer this question in this poll. Okay, I hope this gives you a chance to reflect. Why did you come to this session? What are you hoping to take away? And what could be your next continuous learning to-do list after today? Even if you got all your questions answered in today's session, that's my goal, hopefully. I hope you will enjoy this warm-up like enjoying an appetizer for today's main presentation. Okay, thank you everyone for participating in the poll. Now that we have warmed up our thinking around the topic, let's jump into today's session. We'll be exploring different approaches, use cases, and strategies for integrating LLM, large language model, based AI into institutional research. This is not a technical at all session. It's a overview, and it's about how to use, how to plan our learning and resources I'm going to share, but we're not going to learn it and learn how to implement it in one session, 45 minutes here. So whether you are just curious, you are a beginner, or you already are experimenting with tools like ChatGPT, this session is meant to give you a practical overview of how AI can support your work with a lot of strategies and tips from a lot of trials and fails from my own experience. Let me share a bit about myself. I hold a PhD in higher education with a focus on mixed methods research. Things like interviews, text analysis, statistics, and quantitative analytics. After finishing my degree, I joined LaSalle University, a small private liberal art college, only 2,000 students, near Boston area, but I live in California, so I work fully remotely. So I am a institutional research analyst at LaSalle University, and I believe one of my most meaningful contribution has been improving the efficiency of reporting and program review, those evaluation and data analytics and dashboard, the basically the IR workflow. Those are all the institutional research job duties, right? So the contribution I believe I made has been automating and improving the efficiency of my workflow in a two-person office. So with programming, the ability I get trained a lot of during my PhD years got applied to my current job. And I have been refining my programming skills, and you will see in this presentation of that evolving learning journey. So this has helped me to acquire more time and energy on understanding our data, because all the kind of arduous and time-consuming work are now more efficient, then I have more time and energy to spend on, I believe, what's the most important is understanding our data and communicating around our research results out to the leadership and to the stakeholders across campus so that we can make a real impact from the work we do. And I'm still working on that. But the good news is we at least saved a lot of time with those automated workflow using scripts I've written. And of course, I need to maintain it and update it with newer version of the data source every year. However, many of the part could be just using reusing the previously written script. And I believe some of you or many of you have such experience if you have a programming based interface or have some history or documentation of some kind of script that you can borrow and rerun. So outside of my job, I also started a personal YouTube channel where I share technical skills, data tips, strategies, lessons learned through my professional development journey. It helps me. So this channel, I used it as, of course, a way to promote myself, but more importantly, it helps me to stay motivated to learn, teach, and service, if you will say, as a way to also document my learning journey. For example, it include all presentations I've given at AIR Forum and regional conferences also. Welcome. So welcome to subscribe my channel, especially if we share similar interest on exploring topics like this, technology, how could technology help our institutional research workflow, and other topics like leadership development. That's one area I have been actively developing and engaging with, or even innovative ideas in career development. And welcome to connect with me if you have ideas or collaboration projects or ideas just to talk about. So enough about me. Now let's focus on you. Earlier, you submitted your question about using LLM for institutional research, your biggest question. I believe they could be one of the following types of questions so that we can have a overarching theme of how we're talking about this topic nowadays. The first is, so please raise your hand. So if your question you submitted before in the poll is about what LLM actually are, how they are trained, for example, or you asked how they work. So those are the conceptual questions. So not everyone may have those questions about this, like this are fundamental questions and very important questions to ask to clarify before we talk about it any further. So the better we understand the tools and what is LLM, and the better we can use them. So kudos to those of you who asked these fundamental questions. Definition and clarification is always needed when we are in this world of the buzzword is everywhere. Everybody is talking about AI, but what actually are we talking about? And what's behind the scene? What limitation and the training process and the nitty-gritty of the elements LM is composed of would be helpful for us to reflect on our usage properly. Now, next, if please raise your hand if you had a technical question, like how do I apply a large language model in my IR workflow? What tools to use? And details about implementation, or even how do I evaluate its results? You may look around to see people with similar interests in this room about technical implementation, and you guys can connect later. Now, the next group of question is psychological. This might not always be spoken out aloud, but they are real. Please raise your hand if you ever have concerns about, like, what if I fall behind? That's one of my concerns. What if AI replaces me? If you've had those thoughts, you are not alone. Let's acknowledge that and support each other in building confidence, skills, and stay future ready by starting by attending this session and bringing a lot of the resources after this session and add them on your to-do list and gradually develop through there. So let's move to the last group of questions. Please raise your hand if you are thinking about using LLM with strategic planning in mind. Questions like focuses on the bigger picture, like how do I assess the value of AI? What are the risks and limitations? How do I make the case to leadership for budget or team support? These are the kind of questions that could help shape the long-term planning and could also reveal the leadership qualities in you if you have those type of questions, even if you don't hold that leadership position or title. If you are thinking about those questions, you are a leader. You have those qualities in you. So your question may fall out of these four groups, of course. And if they do, please let me know after this session so we can identify who are the unicorns in the room today. Hopefully, this brainstorming activity helps us to clarify what we want to learn and also opens our vision on thinking about the different aspects of the use of AI for our work, as well as its impact, the challenges and opportunities we are facing. Now I'm going to share with you what are my biggest questions around AI for IR, and I planned this session based on those questions. So here are three questions. First, I've been thinking about what can LLMs really do for institutional research? And beyond the hype, right? What are the actual limitations, whether in quality, accuracy, or ethical concerns for using LLM? Are they all reliable? And are the promises and what the big tech company are saying and advertising real, or are there hidden cautious thing we need to be careful of? So that's one of my biggest question. Second, what are some concrete use cases and practical applications? For example, if I'm new to this, where do I even start? Especially if you are already familiar with it, you may not identify yourself as new to this, but sometimes you are new to using programming language to use LLM. So there are different levels of using LLM, and you could be new to any stage of them. So how do I get started for any stage of using LLM? What new skill sets, for example, should I develop? And how do I prepare for a future where AI plays a much bigger role in our work, which is already coming, it seems. And third, there are so many LLM-based platforms out there. How do I choose the right tools? How do we assess a tool and make that decision? Using some sort of framework or rubric so that we're making a decision systematically, kind of not using our emotion, but more logically and based on data. We always say based on data, evaluation, and research. And we can answer this question and build some sort of rubric and framework and evaluation process when we are using LLM. So these are the core questions I had, and I'll be addressing throughout today's session about those questions. As I searched for the answers to my own question, I ran into what I think is the biggest challenge. I felt overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information and the number of AI tools out there. It became clear that I needed to first figure out how we could use LLM-based AI in institutional research. That's why I've worked to connect the dots and put together three key approaches of using LLM in IR. So these act as a overarching three approaches, and we will dive into each one with those three biggest questions in mind. So the first approach is just give you an overview. The first approach is using chatbots like ChatGPT. By just entering chatgpt.com, you can enter a conversation-like interface where you engage with a large language model through conversation. The second is programming. If you are a programmer using R or Python, using code to connect with the same model, the same GPT model, for example, as you were using the chatbots, you can access that through programming and build your customized workflow or automate your analysis based on your script so that you don't need to enter and ask ChatGPT.com every time you have a similar question, and you can even save your prompts and scripts in a programming language so that you can reuse it and just save a little bit more time. But also, it's awesome for scaling up if your task is repetitive for some time, or you have a lot of similar data requests that you think can be helped by LLM. Programming would be a more efficient way than doing the chatbot approach. The third and last approach is using embedded tools. By embedding, I just mean the tools, the AI function is integrated in the applications. For example, Tableau, I believe they released their AI function. Excel, if you have the right license to use Microsoft Office suite, you would see the Copilot function, which is AI conversation based within Excel. You can note that down if you have never heard that before, and that will be your to-do list after this session. So those are the AI-powered features that are already built into the software we use every day for IR tasks. And they are actively developing more AI features and also two more tools. These are the three different levels, I believe, very comprehensive way to describe how IR have been integrating AI, LLM-based AI into our workflow. They offer a well-rounded way to think about how AI can support what we do. Also, it helps us answering our questions, those three questions in more specific ways, because we need to know in what approach are we talking about. So it's more specific on the different challenges and opportunities and evaluation. And now let's dive into the three approaches one by one. So the first approach is the LLM chatbots, and I don't want to spend more time on the actual interface, but I want to give you the landscape of what are the chatbots out there. I hope you, beyond ChatGPT, which is the most popular, you also heard about the other similar competitor to the ChatGPT, and they are awesome in their own way. So for me, ChatGPT is this general assistance for me, but Claude is more robust if you have very long text, but it does have a lower limitation, a specific amount of token you can use, and it run up quickly because it is a long document. They are good at processing, like writing a cover letter. I have been using it, to be honest, and it's quite well. As long as I gave a very detailed and clear instruction on what to focus on and about my background. The cover letter is written really well. The language is very well. And then for Gemini, it's developed by Google, and I believe it's trained, fine-tuned on coding tasks. So if you are a programmer, you want to debug or understand what certain code does or fix some error message, you can ask Gemini about that. And Gemini does not have a lot of limitations, so you can use it all day and you won't run into limitation kind of problem. And there are three more developed by Grok, I believe, developed by X, Twitter. DeepSeek is an open source, as some of you may heard about it. It influenced our stock market when DeepSeek was released. So it's a Chinese version of ChatGPT, but it's fully open source. So ChatGPT is not open source in that way. And they have you can see the conspiracy theories on your own about the connection between ChatGPT and DeepSeek. But there is also Perplexity, and I've seen YouTube tutorial and reviews around Perplexity, and it seems it's a good tool also. So those are the landscape, and there are many more. There's some French version of large language model, and there is a lot of others. So I've introduced you to those and encourage you to try them all and make your own selection and feel about what are the differences between them. But I'd like to share my way when I first know this, and I had the same question as you are, which is how to choose from various large language model based chatbots. So choosing LLM, I hope I can provide the answer in a simpler way, but due to the time limitation, I've just listed here. The first is check out the leaderboards. You can search leaderboards of LLM online, and you will see a bunch of leaderboards on different tasks. So as I shared before, Gemini is maybe for me, from my personal experience, is better with longer tasks. Gemini is better with coding tasks, and ChatGPT is just a general assistant with very general but very knowledgeable about general tasks, life related issues and questions. So that's the leaderboards. You can dive into that on your own and also make your own leaderboards based on your specific tasks and needs. The second is to understand, like the conceptual question we have, to understand and clarify what LLM is in terms of the techniques and technology behind it, specifically on the training, how a model has been trained, the data set it has, to know more about its capability and limitation. And as I said, we don't have enough time to dive into this, so I've created a YouTube video. You can just search, I don't know, maybe my name, or I'll share the link below this video for you if you want to dive deeper on the 2 points covered, because I had more time spending there, especially on the LLM training processes, the pre-training, how it impact the different features of a LLM and what fine-tuning is and how it could improve the performances, etc. But the third tip that I've already covered a lot in this presentation is your own test and experiment with different models. But that's easier say than do, right? So you need to do your own test of the different models, but think about the framework, think about building a rubric of your own so that you can compare it systematically. For example, what functions they use, that they offer. I believe maybe deep research, a tool and a function that can summarize research papers for you. That's one of the functions that's recently released and now available in maybe across all different LLM chatbots. But that's something to consider if one of them have more function than other. And the speed of the processing and the quality of the output, depending on which model you use, you might get different performances and different details of that. So that's something for you to play around with. Another way, beyond choosing the right model and the model that fit your task the best, another way of approaching this is actually you have a role to play here to improve the performance. Whatever large language model you choose, you need to prompt well. So for prompting, I did a quick literature review of different platforms talking about prompt engineering, and this is the summary of what a good prompt looks like. So, and just I'd like to share with you here, so that you have a guideline of doing better prompt. So first, you need to define the role. For example, you are an expert in some field or define the occupation of the LLM. You are a doctor, having expertise on A, B, and C, or you are a professor studying A, B, and C, stuff like that, or psychologist or a institutional researcher, right? So define the role of the LLM so that it know what type of knowledge they need to retrieve. And then you also may need to define your background, like your challenge. You had a bug, and this is the bug, this is the error message. You need to give the context of your request instead of just asking. For example, you want to know what institutional is if you are very new to this field. You need to say that you are interested in learning and you are in your first month, stuff like that. So more context information describing your goal, describing your background, and the challenge at hand. And then you have defined the role of the LLM and your own kind of role and background and context here. Now is the time to put the input in place. That's a very key point, which is the task that you need LLM to help you with. From the literature review, some of the articles said it's recommended if you use verb to start your task, to start your request. You can say things like summarize, brainstorm, reason step by step, generate. So those were a verb, just like what we are being told and learned in a maybe English one-on-one, writing one-on-one or communication class. It's like clear communication rule of thumb. You use positive term, you use verb to instruct the task and give your instruction. It might also apply to how you communicate with LLM. So that's the task. And you may, this is optional based on if you have those type of input, which is the data. For example, if you are asking LLM to help you analyze some type of comments, the sentiment of the comments, you need to supply that data. And some example as well. Nowadays, LLM is smart enough and powerful enough to do a good enough job without a lot of example, like for simple task and common task like sentiment analysis. You don't need to give example like, I like this. This is a positive sentiment. But for rarely used and rare kind of rare cases and scenarios, you may need to provide some example because you may be the expert in your own field, knowing about, for example, your institution. Your institution is a liberal arts college with only 2,000 students. LLM does not know that, so you may need to give an example of what is deemed as good in your context. Like a community-based approach would be a good example when you ask ChatGPT to say, give me some recommendation. And you say, community-based, we are a small community, so that would be a good example instead of comparing to a larger institution. So that could be some example. It's all based on whether your example would provide more information, and your example may be needed if you are doing some task that is rarely asked, that LLM does not have enough training data set on, or something very contextual and specific to your own needs. You might need to supply examples to LLM. But for other general common tasks, examples are not needed, but you're welcome to provide your own version of good as example to train LLM in your prompting stage. So that might be enough about what you need to tell LLM to do. And now it's the output stage. And this is one more thing, maybe if you are very strict and clear about what type of output you need, this is the place you tell LLM, and you will be feeling like you will appreciate yourself doing this, because when you see LM's output very messy, long, you would go back and revise your output and say, please print out a list of bullet points instead of a verbose output. So that's one of the case where you learn how to improve your prompt, and one of this is specifying the format. And also, as I put here, you can say who are the audience. So LLM could be hinted about the type and style and tone of the output. For example, what is the language to use, the style, as I said, but also beyond the audience, the other type of output specific prompt could be the format, as we talked about, a list of bullet point or a paragraph or a table. Is there a word limit? And so if you like a word by word script, oral style of generation, so those are all the different detailed requirement of your output, and you can choose one that fit best with your need. And note that this might be a iterative process, just like what I gave you an example before. So if you see it's a very messy, long verbose output, you might need to go back, or just ask LLM to regenerate with a more concise version, or with a storytelling style type of format, or telling it if you see specific patterns you don't want, you can tell LLM to avoid those output. So that's a summary of what I learned from a brief literature review of some of the articles around prompt engineering. But we've spent a lot of time on this because prompt engineering is very important. Even you choose the best large language model, but you do bad prompt, the output is still would not be the best for you. So we can focus on what we can do. So the big tech company can focus on improving their LLM performance, but we can improve the performance already by doing good prompting. So this is all about this first approach. We've already covered a lot, but I hope to give you a recap and a review of this approach. So chatbot has been applied to a wide range of scenario for quick tasks and brainstorming, and it's free access, although with some limitation of the token you can use. But nowadays you can choose from multiple platform and LLM, and you can take advantage of all of them. And by the end of the day, you might use all of them by not necessarily need to pay. And it's minimal setup. You don't need to do any setup. As long as you have the access to internet, you can use their interface. Like I said, the cons, the disadvantage and shortcomings of it is the restricted usage and features sometimes. You don't get the access to the most fanciest model, but sometimes that's okay based on the type of task. If it's simple and common, we might be satisfied already with those free LLMs. However, there is a subscription option. Some of you might already paying for it by your institution. It has more token for you, there, I believe maybe no limitation, but you get slower speed if you exceed certain amount of usage. It has better performance because you can select the best model, the largest model to use. However, it is recurring costs. Every month you have to pay, and the budget consideration, especially nowadays, the budget cut for the field of the field of education, I'd say, it could be a concern as the budget is not enough now, and this is an extra cost. And then maybe most importantly, and not everyone aware this, is this ecosystem lock-in. If you subscribe to one service, you are going to only take advantage of that one. And sometimes, for example, Claude might be better on certain tasks, but you are locked in with ChatGPT. So it's tied to specific provider. But if you need flexibility, you are curious about different LLM models, subscription might not give you that flexibility. So that's the first approach. Let's move to the second approach, which is the code-based approach. There are two sub-approaches under this approach. So the first one is using API, the application protocol interface, something like that, which is the bridge. I personally think of it as a bridge connecting you as the user and the whatever service provider. So in this case, LLM provider, large language model provider, and you are using it using this bridge, which is a kind of password-based format thing to access that model. The other one is if you're not going to use what the big tech company have developed as the large language model, you can use a local version on your own computer as well. You're going to download a open source large language model on your local machine, usually needs a large GPU to load those model, but that's another option if you have that infrastructure and resource in place. So let's quickly kind of go through the features, pros and cons also of each sub approach. API, it could be cost efficient compared to subscribing a chatbot, like we talked about in the last slide under the chatbot approach. So because it's not a monthly bill, it's charged by your usage. So sometimes you might not use it. And institutional research, we do not have that amount of big data. So usually the cost is low, a few bucks for a whole research project. That's from my experience. So it could be very cost efficient comparing to subscribing a 20 bucks per month ChatGPT and doing your analysis. And you have to do it in 1 month because you paid only for 1 month, 20 bucks per month. So that's the cost efficiency feature and the flexibility we talked about. While you locked in, if you subscribe, you now get to select different model just using different API key to access different model. You can switch between those model and you can keep your API in one environment profile and like very easy to use them. Just switching the API keys, you can switch the model you use. And then using API and using code-based approach generally opens you up to a community of open source innovation and cutting edge are those tags of those community. Uh, if you're a beginner, you might think this is some sort of a lie or a bait for you. But believe me, it is open source, and the community is actively developing libraries for Python or R, and it has been free open source, but you need to know the programming language to use it. So the cost is behind the scene, is your own manual learning curve, but using the tool, it is free. It's not like it's not a business model that they give a bait for you, claiming that it's free and it's open, and later turn into a profitable producing product. This is not true for Python and R. So using programming language would opens you up to a real free learning resource and tools to use. And they are often cutting edge because people are like passionate people are actively developing different tools for you to use, and usually they came out of the individual contribution and open source community the first before they can be adapted into a business model, and that's why they are the front edge of the field usually. So that's a feature not only for using API, but also this local LLM, because you will be able to use the Python library also you in your uh, programming stage. And then let's oh, there's one more point under the API which you have to be cautious about, because API does send your data to the large language model and then they generate some output, whether it's a summary or some sentiment analysis of your data. So if you have sensitive data, I think you cannot use this approach using API. But if you have public available data or some like email message, something that's not sensitive at all, not student identifiable, I think you can Google about what is sensitive and what is not, and depending on that, um, trying to figure out whether you can use this API for this task or not. So in response to that limitation, local LM fix that sensitive data restriction perfectly, because you have this data security because everything is on your local machine. However, as I said before, it's a technical requirement beyond programming. You also need to set up the hardware, and you need to have the resources, like I mentioned before, the GPU requirement. The larger GPU you have, you can download the larger model so that the performance might be better. And then still, even you have a very large GPU, it might not be comparable to those offered by the big tech company. So still maybe having some trade-offs on the performance. But again, for IR folks, our task might not be that hard. So sometimes it's just common task and common language processing issue, and a local LM approach might be plausible. So that's a lot already about this approach. I already provided a overview of and compared those two approaches. And next, I'm going to show you how to get started if you are new to programming at all. So the first is install VS Code. So this is very basic step. Even before the LLM stage and AI stage, if you are going to program, you have to install a IDE. VS Code is a interactive development, environment, something like that. So install that with extension and Python packages. And I can go spend much more time on this of how I love VS Code from hating it. So this is a story I can tell you and share later, because some of you may know I have been an R user for many years and I've used RStudio. But recently, this year, I believe, because of the LLM and all the machine learning originally from Python community, VS Code has been this overwhelming thing. It used to be, but nowadays I discovered the beautiful side of it because of those extensions, um, uh, learning from some YouTube tutorials, and I can share some of the YouTube tutorials that talks about those useful extensions for VS Code for you. Um, but I am going to stop there. I have too much to say about my R experience versus Python experience, and later after the session, you can approach me with if you have similar experience or the opposite. Okay, the second one. So after you install a place to do Python to write Python, which is VS Code, you just write Python in VS Code, and it has a lot of, like I said, extension that helps you to write. And that's why I love it. So after you have a place to write your Python programming language, you need to download a local machine software. Now it's in the format of software called Ollama or LM Studio. It's like downloading any other application software. You download it, you install it, and you tell in your terminal, you tell which language model to install. So this is for the second sub approach. If you are using LM locally, you will use this Ollama as a place to download and manage your LM models. So this is a tool to use like any other software. It's a useful, helpful app in this stage, in this age of LM. And you need to, if you are not using LM locally and you prefer to use this API, or you would like to try both, I'd like to share like the API key you will need to. For example, I've pasted the OpenAI's website here. You can go to this website and take a look at the API instruction and how to see the manual, check out the manual of how to use API. So again, API is this bridge between a application and the user. The visualization I took from a website is like here. And then that's how to get started. And some of you may wondering about the specifics. And the next slide is the specific code for using API, the first step approach. So this is a survey designer, and I'll walk you through this those code chunks. So the first code chunk, if you are familiar with programming language, you always need to load the modules or library you need to use. So those are the modules that used frequently for LM related tasks. And then you load your environment where you saved your API key, like a password there, for you to access the LM as we covered before. And then you do the input. That's your meeting notes. That's your format notes. Like whatever data you want the LM to read and to use, you need to load it there in your prompt. So this is about prompt engineering as well. Like the input, you need to specify it. So that's one. So in the document, as you can see, the meeting note.txt, it contains a lot of the meeting notes we have. So that's a lot of contextual information we provided, like defining what our context is. And in the meeting note, we highlighted different challenges of our goals for this survey. So that's a lot of the prompt engineering section there. And then the template is something about the output. Like we would like the output to be similar to this template in terms of its format, in terms of its language. So it's also defining the not only the output format, but also gave it a few example for LLM to learn. And then we defined the OpenAI client. This is something you can copy and paste and just revise the content there. So the content is the prompt. So beyond those two documents, what other specifics you need to tell LM to do? And see, the two documents are embedded in your prompt. So that's where you would talk to LLM. And then after you run those code, the last section is turn that into a response and print that response back to you. So this is the output of the whole code, and I use GPT for OAPI, and as you can see, you did not see my template, but my template, it looks like a lot of like this. So the new page is by starting with new page, so our survey platform can recognize it, and it has Likert scale, it has open-ended question, and sometimes you may refine your prompt after seeing the first initial draft. For example, from negative to positive, the Likert scale should be. You can specify that. And then that's one example for the API for designing a survey, and you can do more. And this is the use case part. You can do more with LM, and I believe some of you already maybe attended several sessions in the past few months about those use cases, like analyzing qualitative comments. And again, that's where I presented one more use case with codes and the specifics in the video I presented in March. And then quantitative coding assistant, this is the most frequent place and task I have been using LLM. So as I mentioned before, in VS Code, there are very useful extensions. And three of them I've listed there are top rated, and I've been personally had a good experience with using them. So all three are free coding assistants. So for example, you can write build I don't know, rename A to B, typing in comment, and you hit enter, the next line is automatically generated for you. So nowadays you may not need to know programming, every nitty-gritty programming technique, and you can just write good comment, good prompt, and you hit enter, and it will generate the code for you. However, you do need to know how to debug, while LM can help you to debug as well. So but it's very time consuming. If you don't know how to debug and you don't know in the first place how to write Python, it would be much more time consuming for you than others. Even though you both use this coding assistant, it could be a different workflow still, but everyone start as a beginner in the beginning, right? So still feel free to use and develop as you go. The more you code, the better, especially nowadays with LLM's assistance, you can code really efficiently and learn from your bug, right? And then that's a lot of the code implementation, very specific, especially the coding assistance, is specific for that approach. But there's also other use cases for writing reports and talking scripts. Like this one, I gave this presentation and I prepared some scripts to help me do this better. So that's other use cases just for you to consider. And I also personally use ChatGPT, the phone app. They have a phone app, and I downloaded it as a reading companion. When I am reading, I have some puzzle need to solve, and I need to just have somebody to discuss this plot, or a very deep sentence that I don't know if I understand it right, I would tell it to ChatGPT and say, this is the line. I wonder if this means this, and can you be my reading companion and discuss about this, expand how it could apply to my work or job or life, right? So those are the use cases. And nowadays also multimedia is another. And if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'd see several of my uh, YouTube video are made as podcast, and it's actually automatically created from articles I've read, and I just imported those articles into a software called Notebook LM, and it creates podcasts for you. And some of you may heard Midjourney is the place to turn your text description into picture. Well, there's another YouTube video I made, which I believe it might be related to analyzing qualitative comments, because I exported my ChatGPT conversation when I am using it as a reading companion. I used the output as the data and text to analyze my own conversation with ChatGPT. And I later turned that ChatGPT conversation into a podcast so that I can present the insights from what I read to all of you on YouTube. So that's a connection of multiple use case, both analyzing the qualitative comments, using ChatGPT as a reading companion, and turn it into a podcast multimedia format. So that's a lot of use case we've answered. And now let's move to the last approach, which are the apps that already have AI functions embedded. So here are a recap of those chatbots. So those are the apps that by itself are AI tools. They are not embedded AI tools. They are the AI chatbots. So the Gemini, the Claude, DeepSeek, and this OpenAI logo representing ChatGPT. And then I've presented with you before the three coding assistants, Windsurf, Amazon Q, and Copilot. So those three are extensions, AI-enabled extensions, or just AI code assistant extensions available in VS Code. And then the last one, as I briefly mentioned before, Copilot has been available on across different offices softwares, Microsoft Office softwares. So feel free to explore that. But maybe you need to check with your IT to see if you have the right license that enables you to use it. And this other one, Notebook LM, I've mentioned, is something that could be even a better reading companion, because it summarizes very long text for you and turn it into a podcast if you would like to hear it out. So those are the apps. However, I'd like to share a little bit about my personal view on the emerging future and some consideration. So the first is, I believe more and more platform and services and applications would start, or they are going to develop it into even fancier version. So they'll increase the AI capabilities in the tools we're familiar with, and more tools to come. And then this hype of AI agent has been around for maybe a few months. So what they call it is they are self-directing system. They can figure out the questions and tasks on their own, and it provide end-to-end analysis. Although with human supervision sometimes to correct the AI agent's output and ask it to regenerate to avoid some output, like what we did in the prompt engineering slide. But I still think it could be a hype at this stage, but maybe in the future they can achieve this goal of establishing a self-directing system. But if you search Google, if you Google it, like, is AI agent a hype? The answer is it's partly justified, and you can look into the reasons of it, because large language model nowadays is not perfect. It's not fully reliable, so it makes mistakes, and if you allow it to do a very complex task from end to end, it might make a lot of mistake, and the performance is not acceptable even sometimes. So the AI agent now today might not be the truth. And conservatively speaking, I wonder if it will ever be the truth, because LLM would never be perfect. It always hallucinated by definition because of its training, and it's 99.99, but there's still 0.001% chance of making mistake. And if that stake is high, then the stake of making that mistake is high, we always need to break it down and to come up with more concrete steps of doing things instead of relying on an agent self-direct itself. And then lastly, but not least, is this ethical framework, this evolving standard for responsible implementation. I believe it is still in maybe new stage of implementing LM in our field, and building our responsible practices around it is important. Data privacy, as always, has been a concern for using LLM. So the local machine, local LLM approach might be applicable as a solution there. Transparency and community engagement is always appreciated to get people share their experience, so that bias is identified and the community is aware of how to use it and how to evaluate the output together. So more on strategies and skills. This is from my experiences of the previous applications, and a lot of trials and fails, as I mentioned, a lot of failure. I learned from failure. So strategies working with LLM. The first is, as I mentioned, I personally do not pro for AI agent, and the reason why is I have learned this lesson of if I have a complex task, I need to divide it into more manageable sequential steps for the LLM to fully understand and to fully perform what I needed to do. So it enables transparency and early intervention of a quality control and easier debugging. Because if you ask a complex task at the end, you get some output and you don't know where it went wrong. And breaking it down to smaller steps and build up those checkpoints frequently would ensure, although it's a little bit more job to do, but at the end, you will get to your desired output faster, actually. And approach and plan your prompt using the prompt engineering tips shared before, and also think about your prompt as if you are completing the task manually. And AI is here to help you to scale up and do this quickly, but you still need to think about how would you approach it, so that you can divide it into sensible, logical steps. And this is also important for you as a learner and as someone who are practicing and doing your work to reflect on your own workflow and improve by making your thoughts explicit as a prompt when and you talk with LLM and you are clarifying different steps and you are reflecting on the different output. So thinking about and planning the LLM usage with a manual approach in mind is going to complement each other. And start with prompt optimization. Ask LLM to apply principle of prompt engineering to clarify the task boundaries. So the prompt engineering slide tips before. You can do it with that guideline in mind, but also you can also ask LLM to do it. So this point here is you have your own prompt, but the first question you ask the LLM could be, please improve my prompt. And then use that improved LLM, improved prompt to prompt start a new conversation and prompt LM again. But always, you still need to check the quality control part, check the prompt it generates for you. It usually is better than yours, but may not be perfect. So the guidelines we shared before on prompt engineering is still very helpful as a assessment and evaluation kind of framework and rubric for you. And more strategies here. So this is a little bit, we already covered it a bit, which is insert a lot of evaluation and checkpoints at each step for quality control. Purpose, before progressing, you might need to check the quality of it. And sometimes it need very detail-oriented skills because LM lies very well. So unless you're paying attention to the details, you might not catch it. So still, the detail-oriented skill is still a very desirable quality to have. And also use your personal experience and contextual judgment to assess what is a good output. You are a human, you have a lot of contextual knowledge that might not be verbal. So you might you could tell what is good versus bad better than LM. So utilize your own experience and judgment. And then review the output, either approve it or reject it or select a portion of it, like the part that you think are in good shape. And use that for the next step before proceeding. And then feed those selected output back as a new input for the next phase. So a step-by-step breaking down kind of strategy has been working for me. And then related to those strategies, what type of new skills we need to equip ourselves with entering the future workforce where maybe everybody is working in some capacity using a large language model as their assistant, right? So like how do we prepare ourselves for the future workforce with AI? There's a lot on this slide, but I break it into two groups. The first is domain expert. The second is timeless quality. We can start by covering this timeless quality because it's everything here is what we're already familiar with. It's the communication skill. We still need to say clear prompt. We still need to be specific, and we still have well structure according to the guideline of prompt engineering. We still have to do our own work in communicating well and clearing up our own mind, thinking it clearly and planning the steps clearly. If you don't know what you are doing, it's likely your prompt is not clear and the output is not. However, you can always start with do not like perfectionism is not needed here. You can start small, you can start draft with ideas you have and improve from there. But my point here is the clear prompt and task you can figure out, the better the performance of the output would be. And then another one, beyond the communication, it's always impact. It's always the leadership quality we desire to have. Like we all do our job, but how do we make an impact with our job? You may need to be strategic. You may have to have those soft people skill. You have to build relationship, build trust. You also have to have a first and foremost this mindset of action-oriented research. You do your work, but we are in the field of institutional research involving data that's relevant to maybe faculty and student. So how can we use our work to improve their life and either career or student life success? So make practical and real impact is always a timeless quality to have in this age of AI as well. And then let's cover the next point of domain expert. So like we said before, the strategy. In the strategy, I said we need to break things down. So the workflow design is an important skill to have, and it might come with experiences. So domain expertise is highly appreciated in this age of AI. So entry level jobs might be less, but the expert would still hold their job, from my personal opinion. So they would define the task goals well. They would set up those checkpoints logically, and they know where to stop and check for the quality control. They know clearly what the output should be like, so they can tell LM in their prompt, and they have the evaluation criteria. They can identify the errors, and they can highlight the what is good quality, what is good output versus the bad ones, instead of having no judgment and even don't know what they are doing, right? So that's the workflow design skill. And another one that a domain expert might be good at is they can produce well-crafted draft. So we all heard about trash in, trash out, and this applies to LM as well. If your draft is already having clear and specific information, just like the communication one, if you communicate well with other people, you might also communicate well with LM, and LM can understand what exactly you want to do. And also you have a already comprehensive draft of things listed. You may not need to be comprehensive, but you have a good start, and your draft is an example for LM to learn. So that's a good example for LM to learn and generate a similar quality level of quality output as well. Because if you don't have a well prepared prompt or draft, you would have a much more iteration and consume much more time and energy and resource here to use LLM. So do not abuse LLM, do our own work so that we are environmentally friendly and save us own time and energy as well. So that's the skill. Oh, I have one more slide of the skills. So timeless quality here, reflection. So for this is always mentioned as like growth mindset sometimes, and continuous learning, lifelong learning. So if you can reflect on your own practice daily, you may improve on it, fix the place you need to improve, stuff like that, right? So in this specific context of using LLM, you may refine your prompt. It's an iterative process, as we mentioned before, based on the output to instruct and to do your prompt engineering more efficiently. You may assessing the patterns of the output in the failed or weak output. So you identify the pattern so that you can systematically improve LLM's performance. And then continuous learning, seek for help, seek for advice, open for feedback, and attending professional development sessions, watching YouTube tutorials, including mine, to learn about new tips, tools, methods, and evolving practices, because this is a evolving field using technology and AI and all that in our daily work. So that's timeless qualities. The other one is the experience itself with LLM. So your knowledge about LLM may come with your tests and experiment with it. So you may be familiar with the model's feature, the function, their performances, their like failure pattern, their limitations and capabilities. The leaderboard, they're your personal leaderboards, for example. And then it's a detail-oriented evaluation skills that you may need to have. You need to detect error and be very detail-oriented as well, and summarize the pattern so that in the future you already have experience. Like this LLM always made this type of mistake, so that in the prompt you can specify to avoid that. To improve your efficient workflow instead of doing a iteration again. However, note that LLM also changes. They may change daily. Like you ask the same question, the answer might be different. So that's the randomness. And another tip would be recognizing that, and you can set your own temperature, what they say, the temperature of the model, the randomness of the model also. So that's about the skills, and I hope I've given you enough. So the outcomes from this session, I hope you've learned about how to choose LLM model by experimenting, playing around with it, by following those prompt engineering guidelines, and by considering the budget, comparing especially the chatbots versus the programming approach. And by the way, the AI tools, which is the third approach, is also could be budget consuming. And then I hope as the outcome of this session, you learned some use cases, although I don't have time to cover them all, but I presented you the code, the sample codes for a survey designer using API approach. And I hope you know how did I get started by installing this VS Code, by installing Ollama, and by installing I believe the API, check out the API manual. And also I shared some skills and strategies at the end, and I hope that's helpful for you. And then I hope you also would join this discussion, this community of exploring the LLM usage and its limitation and its ethical concerns. And maybe one day you will present on your institution's maybe data literacy or discussion and policy around it for using LLM and AI more responsibly, not only more efficiently. And also the last point about those all the different applications, and if you have some AI tool that's really you love it, it's very useful, feel free to share it with others as well. And lastly, this is the more part. So the outcome, I hope the first 3 points you've already gained, and maybe it's on your to-do list to learn those skills and strategies to apply them. And this one, my YouTube channel, I shared the link here because more to come. I'm actively also learning about this topic and exploring my own ways and strategies and continue fail, but also learn from it. And I'll share more of it in my YouTube channel. And please feel free to subscribe and follow and build a community and stay connected. Thank you.